When most voters go to the poll on March 3rd in California, they're going to be focused on the Democratic presidential primary, but here in LA County, we have what many people are calling the most important district attorney's race in the U.S. The LA DA's office prosecutes virtually any felony filed in LA County, and they prosecute a large number of misdemeanors that will depend on the jurisdiction. In the past 8 years, they've prosecuted at least 1 million cases. The incumbent, Jackie Lacey, is trying to fend off a progressive challenge from San Francisco's former district attorney, George Gascón, and a public defender named Rachel Rossi. So we'll start with Jackie Lacey. She is the incumbent. She's the current DA of LA County, is a career prosecutor, has been in the office for about 30 years. She's beloved by local law enforcement groups, is generally seen as a more traditional prosecutor, very focused on victims' needs.
So as DA, I have made it a priority to really look at the mental health problem and figure out how we can get people housing. So through the Office of Diversion and Reentry, we've actually put more than 3,000 people in permanent supportive housing since I've been DA in the last couple of years.
Generally speaking, crime rates have been in her favor in LA County during her time. Homicides are down about 15%. Over her 8 years in office. Violent crime has increased significantly in LA, but a lot of that is skewed by an unrelated data tracking problem within the LAPD. So of Jackie's two challengers, the one who's best known is probably George Gascón. He has a long career in law enforcement and as the DA in San Francisco, and he's really one of the stars of this nationwide movement to elect more progressive prosecutors. Gascón's resume is long. He grew up in Southern California, rose through the ranks of the LAPD for a number of years, eventually leaving as an assistant chief. He became the police chief later in Mesa, Arizona, and had some tangles with Joe Arpaio, the toughest sheriff in the nation. Goes on to be the San Francisco police chief and then served as San Francisco's DA for 8 years. In that time, especially as the DA in San Francisco, he's authored some criminal justice reform legislation, namely Prop 47, which was the legislative measure that reduced a number of felonies to misdemeanors and allowed certain people to renegotiate their sentences in state prison. That has brought him obviously a mixed bag. He's beloved by criminal justice reformers and academics for that. Like groups like the ACLU love that move. Police have turned on him severely because of that.
I fought the building of a jail in San Francisco because I very clearly stated that we did not need another jail, that we needed more mental health capacity. So rather than continue to send people in the jail, even though our jail had plenty of capacity, by the way, because since I was DA, we run somewhere between 30 and 40% vacancy, even though our crime continued to go down. But we actually enlisted a group of experts to come in and give us a blueprint of what the intersection between the criminal justice system and mental health should be.
He also expunged a number of marijuana convictions up there not long after Prop 64 passed. He is opposed to the death penalty. He has pushed for rules that would modify the laws governing use of force by police in California, and generally he kind of embodies, like I said, this progressive prosecutor movement. And then you have Rachel Rossi, who is a former state and federal public defender in LA County. She grew up in California. Her biggest accomplishment might actually be legislative, not in the courtroom. She went on to be a policy counsel to Senator Richard Durbin. In 2018, she helped Durbin create the First Step Act, which is a bipartisan criminal justice reform bill that at the federal level will modify mandatory minimum sentences. A lot of people have concerns in general how the federal system, puts harsh sentences on drug crimes. In addition, it will also allow minimal risk or low risk federal inmates to negotiate early release based on time sentencing credits they had previously. Rossi supporters really love her as the true alternative in this race. You have, Gascón and Lacey. As much as this race has been termed in shades of progressive versus traditionalist, they're both career law enforcement. Gascón is a cop, Lacey is a deputy DA, and then a DA herself. Rossi only comes from the public defender background. She's really painted herself as the only person who understands defendants and even victims, people who are on the receiving end of police use of force. She's kind of really positioned herself as the advocate for people of color in LA County in this race.
80% of people in the LA County jail are black and brown. This data can't be ignored. We have to be proactive. We can't just sit back and say the justice system is racially disparate. We can't just sit back and watch it happen. We have to take active steps to reduce racial disparities.
While that has probably earned her some points with, activist types, again, the idea that she comes from outside law enforcement, she's never, while she's worked in the courtroom, she's always been on the defense side of the table. She's never prosecuted a case, never worked as a cop, never been on the side of the criminal justice apparatus that she'd now be looking to run. So a lot of people do point to that as a disqualifying factor. So under California's top 2 primary structure, if a candidate receives more than 50% of the vote, they win outright, and we are done on March 3rd. If that does not happen, then the top 2 vote getters will move on to a November runoff, where then the winner of that head-to-head race will become the next district attorney of Los Angeles. As far as that progressive movement when it comes to DA's races in the US, this would probably be the biggest victory for groups pushing people like George Gascon or Rachel Rossi to run. That is the litmus test of this race, really, is LA ready for this type of criminal justice reform that you've seen pop up in smaller but still major cities in the US? And if Gascon or Rossi were to win, I would think the answer would kind of be an emphatic yes, and if not, then Jackie will win a 3rd term.